who recommended Dave Rodman. Dave's wife Carol knew her husband loved adventure but was very safety conscious.
I took him to the airport, and I can just remember having a really sick feeling. Excuse me. It was the last time I saw my husband. Sorry.
Dave rang from California, and Carol thought she had no reason to worry.
I heard nothing in his voice. I heard nothing from him other than the fact that he was excited to go. He was finally going to go. And I said just the same thing as I always did, just be safe.
The last email that John had from Reliance when he asked, what's the weather like? You know, I'm having difficulty getting the weather here. What is it? The email back said, the weather's fine, nice light winds. See you in Seattle.
But there's also 3 sailors missing off the Oregon coast, including a Sioux Falls man. As KSFY's Kent Erdahl explains, his wife isn't giving up hope.
The boat has been found, and there is nobody there.
Friday morning, the Coast Guard found the catamaran that David's 3-man crew had taken on a delivery from San Francisco, destined for Seattle. But the crew in the lifeboat was nowhere to be found.
My world fell apart.
Carol hasn't seen all the evidence contained in the US Coast Guard report on the loss of Catshot and the 3 deaths.
It's dated December 7th.
Before Catshot left San Francisco, Paul warned Reliance that the voyage was dangerous.
Not a condition for partial compensation.
I was not leaving the boat on a whim, and I put that in an email to Nick Irving. I said I didn't feel the boat was equipped to sail the North Pacific in winter.
I did not leave the vessel on a whim. The vessel was not equipped to sail safely in the North Pacific during November and December.
I asked John, I said, John, if this was not a contract for you and was not a delivery, would you do it?
Would you do the voyage if you didn't have a contract? Replied, no, I would not. When the skipper asked other sailors who had experience in our waters, all indicated that they would not sail north at this time of year. Can't believe that. That's before David got on board.
It wasn't just the weather. Paul was also concerned about the lack of basic equipment and the condition of the boat.
There was some fairly major deficiencies on the boat. One of the things was that there was no survival suits on the boat. There was no heat on the boat.
It had no heat. Oh, Lord, no, really kidding. No radar, no survival suits. In addition, the hull had developed stress cracks because they're blacked out. I don't know who sent this or what they're talking about. That's... Right? No, you gotta stop. Stop.
When the Coast Guard found the catamaran, they also found the captain's logbook. The last entry was at 3 a.m. Monday morning from a location 160 miles south.
So could this tragedy have been avoided? Why did a seasoned skipper like John agree to put to sea?
He's just spent half of the money that he had at the beginning on fuel, provisions, berthing, crew. So he's out of pocket now, and he was risking not getting paid. And it's a hand-to-mouth existence as a delivery skipper. So I think it was undue pressure from the company to force him to take that final leg up to Seattle. And when you see the report of the strong winds, and we're talking gale force winds and above, and huge seas, and it's just not what the boat's designed to be in. This is a cruising catamaran.
A US Coast Guard report later revealed that Reliance told Richard Beckman's family not to alert the authorities. Everything's fine, Reliance said.
If they had, they might have been able to find them at that time. Maybe they could have got to the yacht.
Richard Beckman's body was washed up 130 miles from the boat. The bodies of Dave Rodman and John Anstis were never found.
John he would have been a longtime friend.
Do You had that affinity with him, you think?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was... Sorry, even today. Terrible.
Wendy says a Reliance employee admitted they ignored the warnings.
These words will stay with me forever. I said to her, he told you it was unsafe, and she said yes, and we didn't listen. So they knew. They knew that he was telling them that it wasn't safe. And that was really the last we heard from Reliance.
And now we're another 5 years, and I miss him still. I miss his laugh. I miss, just, we were never going to be dancing in the kitchen doing dishes anymore. And somebody took that away from me. They took it away from me.
Matt Sanders Winch worked for Reliance as a delivery skipper and in the office. He later had a major falling out with the company and severed all ties.
At the time, it was terrible, I don't remember tears, but it was a pretty somber place. But it wasn't long before it was all back up and running as per normal.
Heard a huge bang and felt the boat lurch up and over. One big motion just flipped right all the way over. I cannot believe this is the way I'm going to go out and the way that nobody's going to know how it happened.
You'd think that after the loss of 3 men, Nick Irving would be more attentive to what the crew had to say. But just 2 months later, it would appear Mr. Irving ignored another skipper.
I was instructed, quite bluntly, to say, go north of Bermuda or don't work for us again.
Aboard the 38-foot catamaran with Kevin Klingers was Ollie Templeman from Poole and skipper Steve Hobley from Devon. Reliance appointed Steve Hobley to deliver the boat from France to Florida, and Steve vowed he'd be at his daughter's wedding in the States.
He promised me, come hell or high water, I will be at that wedding, yeah.
The French-built catamaran was headed for Fort Lauderdale on what should have been an easy passage at that time of year.
5 days out of Madeira, and Steve got a text message on his sat phone saying that they wanted to change our course to Annapolis, Maryland. I was kind of confused that anybody would want us to sail up to Annapolis, Maryland at that time of the year.
Now, he didn't want to do it for the reason that this high pressure that sits with the trade winds forming underneath has big depressions going across the top of it, which are the depressions that actually fuel our winter weather as they travel across the Atlantic and give us our wind and our rain and our cold.
Right.
We have, from Florida, the warm Gulf Stream comes up. From the cold polar region, the cold Labrador current comes down, and they tend to meet at Cape Hatteras here. And that difference in temperature helps generate more energy for these depressions so they get a bit more vicious.
The route he was instructed to take was north of Bermuda, which is a completely different ballgame.
So basically he'd gone from the perfect yacht delivery route to being told to sail into
an area of bad weather.
Steve didn't want to divert. It was a bad time of year to head north. Was history about to repeat itself?
They basically held that over his head. Whether, well, if you don't change course and go to Annapolis, if you decide to go on to Fort Lauderdale, we might not have another job for you.
The instructions came from Reliance back in Farnborough, but Steve got his weather information from his children.
Dad had to get his own satellite phone, and even down to training Jonathan and I how to do plot the weather on the internet, with his position, and then text him important things, that were coming up in the weather, things that maybe a yacht company should be doing. I don't know. I wasn't a professional.
The crew's fears had become reality. The catamaran had capsized 200 miles from Bermuda in 45-foot waves and hurricane-force winds. On the upturned hull, Steve was becoming hypothermic.
At one point, I even heard him talking to his mom, I think as he was a little kid. It was very strange and very sad. The ocean just seemed to get more aggressive. And now I am being thrown off the hull with Steve attached to my harness. He landed on me in a way where his head was staring right at my face. And he was underneath the water about 8 inches with his mouth agape and his eyes wide open. He had died, and I was going to try everything I possibly can to at least give his family his body, give them something, if I could do that. Another wave came, blew us off the boat. I climbed back on, and I pulled, and all of a sudden pulled, and it was just yanked, and there was just a life jacket. And with my strobe light flashing through the water, I could see Steve's face, and he was looking up at me like this. But his eyes were closed. And with each blinking successive light, at first he was like 3 or 4 feet underneath the water. Second blink, he was 5 to 6 feet, maybe a little more. And then the last I saw him, he was around 12, I'm guessing 12 feet underneath the water, and that's the last I saw him, and he slipped into the darkness, and I came back on board.
Having nothing back of Dad it leaves a wound. It's like somebody's just walked out of your life. Someone's just hung up the phone and you're in mid-conversation. And it's the most awful thing.